Seems like every video these days is sponsored by some company. I'm old enough to remember when sponsored content first started showing up on this filth site, and the debate around whether we as an audience should support creators who take brand money. There was a real-ass conversation about corporate influence on independent media way back in like 2010. Back then, I was just too young and too stupid to have any real opinion on the matter. But looking at the state of YouTube today, I'm still rather conflicted about the whole thing. Some sponsors make sense, like Incense Zen or Nikon sponsoring a video about their new camera or something. I'm not exactly calling for the end of all brand integration here. But there are definitely a couple that tip from questionable to harmful. We all know the classics like
Raid Shadow Legends.
And I have been forced to watch the
You're not a dish.
Dr. Squatch ad so many fucking times that I get physically ill when I see this blonde bastard on my screen. But there was one sponsor that was featured by almost every big creator back in 2018 that, just as quickly as they came, disappeared. And just like a shitty avatar, you choose which one. They're back. BetterHelp was founded in 2013 after creator Alan Matas continually failed to find licensed therapists that fit his schedule. He said in an interview with Fater TV, "On my previous startup, I had, as all startups do, ups and downs and highs and lows. It got to a point where I thought professional counseling could be useful to me, not from a professional point of view, but a personal point of view. From all the stress and drama, sometimes even depression that this life and the lack of work-life balance can create." He figured, why not use the internet frontier to streamline that process? Seems like a logical step. Healthcare facilities like Kaiser Permanente have been conducting video consultations since 2006. It just kind of makes sense to move the more language-based practice of therapy to video conferences. This is a great idea for people like me who are constantly busy with work and life, who need something just as fast-paced for my mental health. Because if I slow down, even for just a little bit, if I slow the pace, the darkness starts to creep in. So I gotta keep it moving. Back in 2016, when I first started seeing these ads on everyone from gamers to Philip DeFranco, I was severely depressed, had no direction in life, and was seriously considering signing up for a session. Instead, I took happy dancy pills and ran away to New York with a girl I just met on Tinder, and my life has been fucked up ever since. No, I'm kidding. That was a fantastic trip. Just a super mentally healthy thing to do. But I never wound up getting that therapy because I live in America, and even with insurance, I can't afford healthcare. Fortunately, I dragged myself through the roughest parts of understanding and battling my mental illnesses. And I made it through rather unscathed. Like a couple bumps and bruises. Would definitely be in the used category on eBay. But this isn't something that anyone should go through alone, and any expansion to access to mental health care is a good thing. The more people that can access these services and the more we can bring down the barriers to entry for mental health care, the more people can start living a happier, more fulfilling life. While that is important, and anything I say in this video should be viewed with the idea that there is a need for on-demand healthcare services and demonstrable good services like BetterHelp could provide. Seeing BetterHelp in particular make a comeback like this makes me incredibly nervous. It's not just on newer channels next to a G Fuel sponsorship. BetterHelp is getting ad placements on YouTube veterans like Anthony Padilla's show, and even lefty adjacent creators I love like Ethan is Online and Noah Sampson. Fuck, I am never getting a sponsorship. First you talk about fucking Nazi archaeologists, and now you're fucking going after one of the biggest YouTube sponsors? You are a fucking idiot. So let's get into it. Why does the for-profit mental health industry worry me so much? Where did BetterHelp go, and why are they back? Let's start with the basics. What is BetterHelp? BetterHelp is simply an online service connecting people in need of mental health care services with better access to therapists at more convenient times and locations by utilizing video calling and texting. Patients could access their therapist at nearly any time, and that therapist could be swapped at any point via the app. So far, so good. There's nothing worse than being stuck with a therapist that doesn't mesh well with you because that's the only one in your local area that your insurance will cover that fits your schedule. It's quick and easy as everything should be in the future, and nothing bad has ever happened from privately streamlining a crucial service for profit, right? I remember the original BetterHelp ads way back in 2016. I was seriously considering signing up, but just like college, I never got around to it. Life kept happening, and eventually I forgot about being a healthy person and embraced my chaotic early 20s. Fun times from what I can remember. But then 2018 rolls around. I'm again in a depressive cycle, again primarily over a girl, and seriously considering signing up for BetterHelp out of convenience. I was seriously drawn to the idea of having a text therapist, as I'm already much more inclined to the nature of texting. Especially as an adult, as there's no expectation of immediacy, you can have a really well thought out conversation over a long period of time without missing a beat. In the time between when I saw my first BetterHelp ad on Philip DeFranco, BetterHelp had turned from a budding new technology with the potential to help millions into a corporate behemoth. The original BetterHelp company, founded by Alan Matas and Danny Bragonier in 2013, had been acquired by the largest telemedicine and virtual healthcare company, Teladoc, for $4.5 million in 2015, and by 2018 was seeing $60 million in profit. 3 years and this company rocketed to fame and fortune. Millions were getting access to cheaper online therapy that fit in more with the modern digital lifestyle. People were absolutely flocking to the service after seeing glowing reviews by their parasocial online friends that were corroborated by dozens of online 5-star reviews on their site. It all seemed great. Many content creators praised BetterHelp for personally helping with their depression or burnout, a very common video topic back in 2018. But something felt a little off, a little scripted. And I mean, it was. It was literally an ad. After telling a deeply personal anecdote about the creator's struggle with mental illness, here is them offering you an affiliate link for your mental health journey, which just so happened to be one of the biggest contributors to BetterHelp's growth. Nowhere was it disclosed that the creator is getting a monetary kickback for every person who signs up through their affiliate link. According to AFPay, is this a reliable source?
Fine, keep going.
All right, fine. The creator could net up to $100 per person who signs up through their link, and sometimes up to $200 according to Dr. Allison Answers. Seeing that these creators have millions of subscribers and constant growth due to the algorithm, it led to the creators exploiting their viewers' mental health for profit. Now, I'm sure you can try to spin it like, oh, but it's profit in the name of cheaper therapy. Was it really though? While yes, at $65 a day, $260 a month, BetterHelp is cheaper than traditional therapy. In the sorry states of the United States, our insurance typically pays for a chunk of that, so the out-of-pocket costs typically tend to be cheaper than paying for the privately owned therapy company. The world was hard after 2016. The convenience factor and ease of access were appealing to a lot of people, leading for the subscription-based model to rocket BetterHelp's success. But like any soaring high, the crash came hard. Amid seas of suspiciously generic positive reviews was a growing wave of discontent towards BetterHelp. More and more stories were coming out of unprofessional therapists that wouldn't even show up to the session, but the automatic charge sure did, and even being charged prematurely before a free trial had ended for the services. The cracks in the ship were starting to show from growing so fast, so quickly. BetterHelp's strategy was a mass advertisement model designed to get themselves in front of as many faces as possible while neglecting the people who were actually there for help. But that was never really the game. In the current terms of service, it clearly states, "We do not control the quality of the counselor services, and we do not determine whether any counselor is qualified to provide any specific service, as well as whether a counselor is categorized correctly or matched correctly to you. While we may try to do so from time to time in our sole discretion, you acknowledge that we do not represent to verify and do not guarantee the verification of the skills, degrees, qualifications, licensure, certification, credentials, competence, or background of any counselor." I just want to jump in here real quick and mention BetterHelp has updated their terms of service to reflect that their therapists are now licensed, accredited, and checked by the site, which should be the fucking minimum, but hey, we can't, I guess, cry over spilled milk. But these are no longer the current terms of service. Wait, so y'all didn't stop to check and make sure the counselors were licensed? It is your responsibility to conduct independent verification regarding any counselor that provides you with counselor services, whether through the platform or not. And we strongly recommend that you will conduct this verification prior to communicating with any counselor through the platform and on a continuous basis as you use the platform. Taking the libertarian approach to authentication, I see. Well, I hope you can identify a real medical document from something someone can just print from the internet through your phone. If you are thinking about or if you are considering harming yourself or others, or if you feel that any other person may be in any danger, or if you have any medical emergency, you must immediately call your local emergency services number and notify the relevant authorities. The platform is not designed for use in any of the aforementioned cases, and the counselors cannot provide the assistance required in any of the aforementioned cases. Access to mental health care until it becomes a liability. That's the free market in action. The platform is not intended for the provision of clinical diagnosis requiring an in-person evaluation, and you should not use it if you need any official documentation or approvals for purposes such as, but not limited to, court-ordered counseling or emotional service dog certification. It is also not intended for any information regarding which drugs or medical treatment may be appropriate for you, and you should disregard any such advice if delivered through the platform. So it's not real therapy. At least as it was marketed back in 2018, BetterHelp was supposed to be this revolutionary new tool in mental health care, but turned out to just be a bunch of people who weren't necessarily licensed and not even to be a good therapist. You know what? I'm not even gonna call them therapists anymore. Like, let's just call them counselors. Do you have to be licensed to be a counselor? That's what BetterHelp's calling them. It's fine that the BetterHelp counselor would be the right kind of counselor to help with whatever issue the patient may be dealing with. There are plenty of stories of people who have turned to BetterHelp for help with their depression who, as someone who suffers from depression, I relate to on a deeply personal level. Before we get into that though, I am just compiling stories and anecdotal evidence. Everything I say will be backed up by sources, but is pretty much just my own suspicion and speculation. This is not intended to be medical information, informed medical advice, and I am neither endorsing nor saying BetterHelp should be shut down. This is just compiling stories and giving my opinions. Nothing more. It's not hard finding testimony online of people dealing with depression having a horrible time with BetterHelp. In the end times, with another mass potential illness on the horizon, it's completely understandable how people need another person to talk to about their feelings of loneliness, their feelings of helplessness, like you're just floating through your existence, doing the things that I need to, but not the things that I want to, and slowly my life and youth are being sliced away by surviving. You know, kind of feeling sad every so often, and a lot of people turn to BetterHelp as a resource. In a Vice article about turning to BetterHelp for depression, author Graham Isidore talks about his experience with a counselor that just didn't click. He went into it looking for help with his feeling of listlessness, as his job was just tweeting, writing, and making content. All the stuff that he used to do for fun had now become a paid job, a classic and absolutely valid reason for feeling depressed. The commodification of the things that bring us joy suck all the life out of our passions and turns it into a profit-making task. And when it came time to relay that over text, Graham just felt like it was banal and not worth complaining about. But he still felt like shit. The counselor suggested trying a video chat. After the chat, Graham came to the realization that the connection just wasn't there, and therapy was quickly becoming an expensive chore rather than the help that he was there for. He quickly dropped the service. Of course, Graham could have switched counselors at any point via the app, but as anyone who suffers from depression can tell you, even the smallest of setbacks can zap all the strength you had for fixing a situation. Even back in college when I was doing my little bit of counseling, I ran into the same exact issue. Me and my counselor just weren't connecting on anything. I wasn't improving at all, and instead of trying to fix the situation, I just gave up and resigned to the darkness. I knew I was depressed, but I didn't have a diagnosis or any real way of helping or fixing it except for some simple CBT practices. Which is exactly the situation many people who have turned to BetterHelp find themselves in. If you are looking for a diagnosis or major intervention in any way, BetterHelp is not the solution. And they're upfront with that in their user agreement. In 2018, after coming to the conclusion that BetterHelp was not the innovation of mental health care that they had marketed themselves as, Philip DeFranco, Boogie2988, and They Who Shall Not Be Named all made videos denouncing them, calling them more of a scam than a service, and apologized for ever working with them. For most companies, this would be the end of things and they would slink away with their tails between their legs. But apparently, BetterHelp and Teladoc are not most companies. When the world ended in 2020, apps like Talkspace and BetterHelp blew up in popularity. When the only people you can talk to are the people in your bubble, it makes sense that you need someone else to help you with the stresses of the apocalypse. As we all know, since we live in a similar world, things just never got better, and these apps continued to see massive growth until it got to the point that they could make the leap from being advertised solely to the chronically online to more broad network advertisements. Starting in December of 2021, I started seeing a massive increase in BetterHelp ads on YouTube, but more shockingly, BetterHelp ads on TV and Hulu. BetterHelp was everywhere, exposed to more people than ever, claiming that it could be the help for depression, anxiety, and many other mental illnesses that plague our modern society. But remember, this is not real therapy. It has no real means of diagnosing, prescribing for, or helping in any real capacity of these serious mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. When we are in a lockdown situation in seemingly unprecedented times, how can you market yourself as a cheaper alternative to therapy when you are neither cheaper nor real therapy? BetterHelp was constantly marketed by online influencers as the key that helps with their depression and anxiety that was affecting their lives. Same goes for their ads. BetterHelp's recent ads often feature a character whose depression or anxiety comes through in an otherwise normal conversation with the other character not relating, marketing BetterHelp as an option to turn to.
I want to be more confident and less scared. Sometimes I feel like I'm on an island and everyone else is in these rowboats with their full lives rowing somewhere, and I don't have a boat. I'm just stuck, forgotten.
I mean, what do you want to eat?
Oh,
If this is where the marketing ended, I would have zero issue with this. But there are multiple ads depicting a character in a dire, life-threatening situation that, if ignored, will kill them, as a metaphor for ignoring mental health issues.
Them Diamondbacks are mighty poisonous. Get you to a doctor?
Oh, Clive. I learned from my pappy and my grandpappy before him. Cattle here don't need no doctor. Unless it's dead serious. Maybe in a few weeks, when it's not so busy. Oh.
But if you think this metaphor through, is exactly the kind of thing that BetterHelp is not intended for. Or this ad depicting someone experiencing an anxiety attack. There's just something weird to me about showing the literal manifestation of crisis, literally her world falling apart around her, and the text at the bottom saying, if you are in actual crisis or in danger of harming yourself or others, seek actual therapy. Because at the end of the day, for-profit services like BetterHelp and these other telemed services will always sacrifice quality for convenience, and the people who need the help will suffer for it. At the end of the anxiety commercial, they talk about grounding techniques, and this is a great example of what BetterHelp really is here for.
I had another panic attack earlier. Can we go over some more grounding techniques?
This kind of counseling can only be done if you already know what you're dealing with, because as mentioned before, BetterHelp counselors cannot diagnose. So if you have new or worsening symptoms, which is a very common thing as situations and stress levels change, there's not a lot the counselor can do except recommend going to an in-person therapist, which defeats the whole purpose of telehealth. With allegations of mismatched counselors, unlicensed counselors, and a few examples of horrific outcomes due to the limitations of help BetterHelp could provide, the app started tanking in popularity. But with the arrival of COVID-19, BetterHelp started seeing a boost in popularity that just never died and is now looking at upwards of $700 million of profit in 2021. How did a company whose biggest stories to date were scandals go from floundering in the internet markets to getting back up on its feet and running a proverbial marathon? Well, we live in a country where 1 in 5 people, 20%, need mental health care, but only half of those people actually get access to it. This is theoretically where BetterHelp could step in and offer access to cheap, effective therapy for those who cannot leave the house due to pandemic or otherwise. This means there were millions of people who needed access to mental health care before the pandemic, and that number has only gone up since quarantine has set in. Even before coronavirus was in the normal lexicon, BetterHelp and Talkspace were seeing massive growth in their numbers. BetterHelp downloads in the US grew from 50,000 in January to 80,000 in April, a 60% increase. They grew just 15% between January and April of 2019. To satisfy the flood of new customers, both Talkspace and BetterHelp said they are rapidly onboarding new therapists. To accommodate the massive influx of people seeking services, the Department of Health and Human Services allowed counselors to start speaking to patients on non-HIPAA platforms and relaxed the vetting process of said counselors. Basically, they took the neoliberal approach and when faced with a multifaceted issue, let the market decide. Because that always goes great for the end user, especially in healthcare. This deregulation, coupled with the spike they got from their boost in popularity, helped them soften their image and get themselves in front of people who had never heard of BetterHelp before, creating the wave they're currently riding on. And because they're actually not offering any medical advice or services, they can't be held accountable if their advice doesn't work or makes things worse. It's all profit, baby! On the BetterHelp website, they claim counselors can make up to $8,500 a month, $102,000 a year, and highlights how they can work as much as you want, which is something that I would expect to hear in a DoorDash hiring commercial. That specific language makes me incredibly doubtful that any counselor is even making close to that wage, especially considering, according to ZipRecruiter, Glassdoor, and Salary.com, that would be at the very top of the salaries for licensed therapists. Side note, according to alltherapyschools.com, the median wage for a licensed therapist in Oregon, where I am, is around $60K a year. And while that is considerably more than I make, seems incredibly low for the amount of information that you have to stay current on and the raw emotional labor of being a therapist. How about we end our contracts with Halliburton and Raytheon and use that money to invest in human infrastructure and healthcare both physical and mental, instead of blowing up people in countries 90% of the American population couldn't even fucking pronounce. Imagine that. A well-funded program that actually addressed mental health services, made the cost negligible to hopefully zero, and actually provided you with a therapist to video chat with, to talk to actually establish that patient-therapist connection with. Imagine a world where all counseling and therapy could be scheduled and worked on little by little, day by day. Just like you, your treatment changes with the changes that come in your life, all marked by your progress and input. Some would be delighted at the wealth of information that could be learned about themselves. And others, myself included, see this as a Black Mirror episode come to life. Every session, every reaction, every breakthrough, every exercise, every book recommended, recorded, every win, every setback, saved and logged. Forever and ever, as long as that database remains, your data will be there to reference. While this can make your user experience more personalized and can even help you spot tendencies you didn't even realize about yourself, such as how a lot of people came to realizations about themselves from their TikTok algorithm, this also brings up questions on who can see your data and what will BetterHelp do with it in the future. Already, there are stories of BetterHelp and Talkspace sharing personal data with third-party sites such as Facebook, Pinterest, and Snapchat. Speaking on what they found in the data transferred from BetterHelp, authors Molly Osberg and Dhruv Mehrotra said, "Based on what we saw, Mixpanel knew where we were and what device we were using, approximately how old we were, whether we consider ourselves spiritual or religious, our financial status, and our sexual orientation. It also got information on our broader mental health histories, how long it had been since we'd been in therapy, and when we'd last had a plan to kill ourselves." BetterHelp is sending every piece of data they possibly can to create a more personalized advertising model to you. And knowing what we know about Facebook's emotionally manipulative algorithm could easily become an exploitable path. Is Facebook recognizing this depression and then sending you to BetterHelp? Or is Facebook's algorithm creating this depression to boost BetterHelp's sales? This, of course, is speculation, but it is very interesting that the first mentions of Facebook's depression-recognizing algorithms coincide in late 2018, right when BetterHelp is getting its big telemed boost. This Internet of Things is a nebulous network of our personal data being sold to the highest bidder, and our mental health is no different. As the old joke goes, if the service is free, you are the product. But now we are paying to have our data stolen and sold. You gotta love capitalism. In a statement, BetterHelp claims their privacy policy typically far exceeds all applicable regulatory, ethical, and legal requirements, which the article does point out is true, but is part of the problem. While they may be acting within the guidelines of HIPAA was created in the 90s and is now outdated for our modern paperless system. Plus, as a private company, if BetterHelp was bought out by a larger telehealth company and they just decided that they are no longer going to be doing the HIPAA compliant stuff, they kind of just can. Plus, with the deregulation on HIPAA non-compliant platforms, I don't think there would be any recourse. But this is really missing the forest for one really big corporate-sponsored tree. Could BetterHelp be good for the world? Yes, absolutely. And this is a hole that needs to be filled with some kind of mental health care counseling. The concept of just having a therapist that I could quickly call or text to help calm racing or intrusive thoughts would literally be life-changing, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who agree with me on that. But for more serious things like my ADHD and my depression, I really need someone that can prescribe medications if I decide to go down that route, but more importantly, actually have the ability to talk to me about that in a serious capacity. And for-profit models like BetterHelp are just never going to be able to fulfill that. Not to be obliquely conspiratorial, but they profit off of your sessions. Like, what real incentive does BetterHelp have for making positive progress with you? Because once you have those tools for success, once you have maintained a level of stability, that's a chunk of change BetterHelp won't be seeing from you. Jacob Geller talks in his recent video about mental health apps about how many of them push you to be a productive person, a happy little worker, which is a fair and valid criticism of these apps. But personally, I think it more highlights the fact that these apps and BetterHelp can't help you. Maybe I'm just a neo-Marxist. I don't know. That's really more for Ben Shabibo and Steven Pinker to call me. But I truly believe a lot of our mental illness plague stems directly from our modern capitalist society. I want to talk more about this later with more sources, but a lot of mental illness springs directly from material conditions and having to commodify yourself just to survive. I can go to therapy all I want, but if I'm working 40 hours a week at $15 an hour, going to school or doing a side hustle to make ends meet, and I'm still being priced out of buying food, rent, gas, insurance, and the ever-increasing bills I have to pay, and I have no time to make any headway on fixing that, I'm sorry, a fucking grounding exercise is not going to help me. This system is not designed to be livable on minimum wage, yet most jobs pay a minimum wage because there's little incentive to pay more than that. I love working in the cannabis industry. It is one of my favorite jobs to help people every single day. But even with tips, I am barely scraping enough to pay rent and to drive to work, not to even mention food. Every single year, my rent goes up, but my pay sure doesn't. The anxiety of not making your rent isn't gonna go away because you've read Bessel van der Kolk. The depression from only eating bread for a week and being malnourished isn't gonna go away by talking it out. These material conditions dictate how we can live, how healthy we can be, how much free time we have, because even if it's your day off of work, if you can't afford to go anywhere, what are you gonna do? No amount of talk therapy is going to change material conditions that more and more of us are living in every single day, draining what little money we have into the pockets of rich medical industrial complex capitalists that profit off the suffering and exploitation of the working class in yet another avenue. I'm really not trying to end this on such a downer note. It's really hard to do that though when you're talking about the for-profit medical industrial complex. It's always a sad story when you mix profit and health. But there are a couple positives that we can at least take away from this. Through the proliferation of BetterHelp and just in general more positive depictions of therapy in media, mental health care is being destigmatized day by day more and more, and is quickly turning from something only the freaks did into, again as Jake Geller said, something almost sexy. Therapy is thankfully getting a little bit cheaper little by little. In Oregon, we have a program to get people into therapy as low as $50 to $60 per session, which is just as cheap, if not cheaper, than some of these telehealth services, and is actual therapy. Obviously, we need more therapists in general, but I would love to see expansions of services like this all across the country. Obviously, a Medicare for all, single-payer, free at point of service solution is the end goal for healthcare, both mental and physical. But by rejecting these corporate-bought therapy simulation, we can band together and demand revolutionary change for how we deal with mental health care. But for now, we just have to deal with our incredibly ghoulish, ridiculously expensive, stupidly ineffective healthcare system, and I, for one, am fully over that.